Good evening, everybody. Welcome to CWU Live. My name's Chris Webb, Head of Communications. We've got a really interesting session for you tonight. We're going to break down Royal Mail Group pensions. We know it's complex, we know it's detailed, we know many of you, we can see from the feeds today, have got loads and loads of questions. We've got the perfect people here with me to digest that, though. We've got National Officer Andy Fury. Welcome, Andy.
Hi, Chris.
And we've got, I think, best described as our resident pensions guru, Lionel Sampson. How you doing, Lionel?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks for inviting me.
Good to have you both with us. I suppose I should start, first of all, we can see on the pages many justified questions about where the negotiations with Royal Mail Group are on things like new entrants, sick pay, and other USO and other matters. I've been speaking to Martin Welsh, we're speaking to Dave Ward today, and we're going to be getting you a detailed update out in the next couple of days. So please bear with us and we'll let you know exactly where we are on those things. Tonight's session, however, is detailed and it's comprehensive, and I think it's going to be really, really interesting. I can see by the amount of people already online that you're really up for this session. It's about Royal Mail Group pensions. We have, as a union, Lionel and I actually did a session some time ago where we did a quick one with you as Royal Mail members, and you were saying, you know, you wanted something, a guide, an easy guide that you could go through as members and say, like, this is my question, where do I find the answer? Andy, Lionel, the education department, I think the postal department have spent some real time now putting together what we'd call almost like a pension Bible, where all the key information is there for our reps and our members, whatever scheme you are in. I'm going to turn to you first, if I can, Andy, just to give more background on the booklet that's been produced by everybody and why we did that and the value you think of it.
I think, first of all, before we get into the booklet, I think it's worth recognising that the anniversary of the collective plan, the first year, was early this week. So the 7th of October last year, the collective plan, which is the first of its kind in the UK, came into being, and we're a year into that scheme. And we had a meeting earlier this week with Royal Mail, and what was reported was a number of significant statistics, and all of these statistics are worth bearing in mind. First and foremost, there's £600 million in the scheme now that's been put in directly by our members every week, every month, out of their wages and salaries, along with what the employer their contribution as well. So the scheme is very, very healthy. Sadly, there's been over 150 of our members that have passed away in the last year, and of course the death in service benefits are critical for the next of kin, and we've been talking about that, and we're going into more detail on that, I think, Chris. And a real positive figure, and something we need to really promote, is that 40,000 of our members have actually agreed to pay an additional 1% into the scheme, and the employer matches that. So an extra 2%, one from our member and 1% from the employer, is going into the scheme. Now, 40,000 of our members have availed themselves of what technically is free money because they're getting an extra 1% from the employer going into the scheme, and we would encourage as many people as possible to think about that. I mean, it's obviously if you can afford to do so, but for putting an extra 1% in every week or every month, the employer's going to match that, and that will make the benefits for when you retire so much better. So that's something we have been promoting, and we were pleased to see that figure because, and the way to do it is by using the People app, and it's very, very easy to go in and say, yes, I'll put an extra 1%. In terms of the booklet, there's a lot of hard work going into the booklet. We're not quite there yet. We're at the stage of the designer working it all up, but we've got the product in terms of what we want to say in it, and we're optimistic in the next fortnight that we should be able to get that out to our branches. So it will be, for want of a better expression, the Bible, and Lionel and I and yourself will be talking about that at some detail tonight.
Yeah, we will. Lionel, I mean, there's loads of people watching, which is great. I guess that people will be joining from all sorts of backgrounds. So we've got new entrants, we've got senior people who've done decades, we've got people in between. Put you on the spot here a little bit, but is there like a chance of a plotted history of all the pension schemes that are out there? And I'm not pinning you to the exact second and minutes and stuff, but just to guide through people so they understand, where they'd fall,
So when I first joined Royal Mail, which I worked in for 27 years, was back in the late 70s. It was compulsory. You had to join the then scheme. But that scheme had been going 8 years and it had moved from the civil service. And there were some major achievements achieved in that scheme. That scheme then got changed in the 1980s, where it got split into 3 different sections. I won't go into the intricacies of the changes in the scheme, but it changed. It then changed again when we were moving over into the the plans to privatise the Royal Mail and to sell it off, with a chunk of it, somewhere in excess of £39 billion, went over to the government because they took over the running of the scheme. And that, to some degree, is when all the confusion started, because you then had people in the remaining element of the care scheme, you had people in the DC scheme that had been launched, the defined contributory scheme for new entrants, because you couldn't go into the scheme until a year had gone in the working life. And then we came into the further changes that were brought about with the collective scheme coming in. And in this booklet, we've tried to map out a direction for people to actually identify what those schemes are. And if I could go back to what you just mentioned, Chris, the first broadcast we did, this booklet is a product of that. Yeah. Of that broadcast, because what we identified very quickly in that broadcast was that people were saying, I'm in the scheme, but I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm on. I don't understand the benefit illustration. I don't know how much my pension's going to be worth. Is it worth being in the pension? So what we're trying to do is address all that. So we're coming from a very close historical link to pensions in our working lives. We've always seen, I was just saying to Andy, the oldest booklet I've got went back to 1971 when we were in the talks with the then government, and we called pensions then deferred pay. That was before anybody else had ever used that term. So pensions are very close to our heart, and this booklet and what we're trying to achieve of it is very close. It's very close to what our members need.
Thank you, Lionel. Andy, one of the things that people always, I can see it on our pages now, people got loads of really intricate questions about themselves personally, and I think pensions is almost like algebra at school. It's like, there's some people that are really into it, like you two, and there's other people that are like, wow, when they see that stuff and can't get their heads around it. Do these booklets and the resources we're building, do they simplify? Is the average member going to be able to pick this up and go, right, I've got a grasp of this now?
I think the booklets in the main are aimed at our representatives to equip them with the skills and the knowledge to be able to converse and chat with members and answer members' questions. I think that primarily is where we want the booklets to be aimed at. But yes, the booklets are written in a way that has tried to, take out the jargon wherever possible. And, I just listened to Lionel then, we got the DC scheme, defined contribution, then you got the defined benefit scheme, you've got the collective plan. There's lots of different abbreviations and language that is alien to ordinary people like ourselves, and yet we've got to get our heads around it. And what I would say is that pensions, pay when you retire, is so vitally important as an integral part of your terms and conditions. Of course, your week to week's pay or monthly salary, your annual leave, all those things are vitally important, but so's being able to have a quality of life once you retire. And, wage in retirement, deferred pay, as Lionel referred to it. This is so of paramount importance to people, and irrespective of age, people have got to get their heads around it, because we don't know what's going to happen with the state pension. It's already been put back to 67 years of age for men and women. It was 60 years of age for women. I shudder to think what's going to happen in the future about state pensions. So an occupational pension, it has to be of vital importance to people, because, what our members will be facing is pensioner poverty in the future, and the ability to live and have a quality of life, a reasonable quality of life, won't be there unless they have this decent pension. And we're already seeing people working till God knows what ages of life, and they work till they drop. And what we need to ensure is that people can afford to pay the bills, keep a roof over their head in retirement, and that's what's so vitally important with pensions.
Thank you, Andy. I've got some great questions coming in, by the way, so do keep them in, keep sharing the link, let people know, colleagues know the session's going on. Lionel, there's a ton of questions here. I'm trying to generalise some of them. So Glenn asked one, and it's been asked in a few places in different ways. He said, I've been a postee for over 30 years, so I've got him in a few different schemes. It'd be great to have somewhere where I can see all my pension schemes in one place, because they're scattered around. And also, I'll add in another question, which is Bergley asked there, is there a potential singular contact point to get advice on pensions?
So, first of all, we're doing the booklet. The booklet is key to us, and it's the first time we've tried to bring everything together. We're even including in it the government's nest scheme, so because people who are joining now are going into that scheme. So hopefully the booklet's going to be that first step, Glenn, to actually for you to see the schemes. The other thing that we're developing and will be launched at the same time of the scheme, something we touched on at the original briefing that we did, or the original broadcast, Chris, was that we're going to actually have a walkthrough video that takes people through every single section of the booklet and the various schemes. And Paul Kennedy, one of my fellow trustees, has done the walkthrough on that. Now I come to the bad news. The trouble with these schemes, and I think it's an issue that we're not going to let go of because we're concerned about it, is that each one of them becomes ring-fenced under law. They're telling us. So that when you've got like the new collective scheme, that they're not talking to the people in the Royal Mail statutory scheme, and ergo they're not talking to the Royal Mail pension plan. So things go on in them schemes that each of them don't know. And when that comes to the boiling point is when people are retiring, or they've got a particular problem, or there's a death in service. And we're certainly dealing with a lot more inquiries around that. So Glenn's raised a really important point there, and it's something that we're alive to. Have I got an answer tonight for that? As a trustee of the scheme, I don't like the way it's being run at the moment, in that they're people in their own little pods. I know the union's negotiators here don't like that, and they want to address that. But the reality is that's the world we're facing at the moment, but we're not going to turn away from that, and we're going to take that on, because we've got to be more joined up than what we currently are on it.
Thanks, Mark. And Ed Watkins has said, we all want the booklet, not just our reps, and just to reassure Ed, obviously, we're going to be doing an online platform. Everyone will be able to access that. We've got obviously the online platform. Lionel and yourself have talked about video content we're going to do. We're doing sessions like these. We have, as a result of the booklet, loads of podcast content planned with you two and other officials in the union. Is there anything more you think we can be doing to sort of simplify and make sure members have all the info they need on pensions?
Okay, so in terms of the previous question, unfortunately, each separate scheme has to have its own separate contact details. So, and there is, Lionel's talked about our frustration about the different schemes and not talking to one another. Has to be a firewall by law between the different schemes, because they have to be separately funded, separately administered, and the cost of that has to be separate, unfortunately. In terms of what more can we do, I think that I genuinely believe that we are doing more as a union to promote pensions, to raise the awareness and the knowledge on pensions more so than ever before.
Yeah, agree.
And it's because it's such a complex and difficult matter that people tend to shy away from it or steer clear for it. And of course, there's always going to be other issues, the day-to-day industrial relations problems, which are immense, aren't they? Yeah. That we need to address and deal with. So it's easy to kick the can down the street, down the road on pensions, but I mean, I believe that we are, as a leadership of this union, doing more and more to raise that awareness and knowledge and profile. I think the employer's got a responsibility here as well. The employer needs to do so much more to promote and raise a knowledge of how important pensions are. And we said this when we met the employer earlier this week, Lionel and Tony Bush and myself and others. What we did is we said to them, look, you need to set aside a work time listening and learning. You need to ensure that there's more videos being done. There needs to be potentially signposting on pay slips and such like. So there's a lot more that the employer can do, and we are talking to Royal Mail, and they do seem keen to want to do more with us. So it's something where we can be aligned. But look, it's vitally important that we put the booklet on the online platform, and that we do more of these types of sessions. But we also want to ensure that all of our representatives on the ground have the Bible, so that they can have the confidence to engage in conversations, and that is imperative.
I think you're right, Andy. Spot on. I think got some great questions, by the way. I'm just filtering them through so I can group them. Phil Lionel says, we'll be retiring next summer at 65. Can I still take my pension then, or do I have to now wait until I'm 67? I'm going to give you a couple at a time, Lionel.
Yeah.
That's all right. So that's the first one, mate. And the second one is from Robert Alley, who says the new scheme is a cash balance scheme. Is that correct? If so, could you explain how that works?
The new scheme, the collective scheme, is he's referring to. No, I wouldn't call it a cash balance scheme. It's not that at all. It's a scheme which is based on the contributions that go in, and it's based on some of those being guaranteed, i.e. the tax-free lump sum, but it's not a cash balance scheme. The cash balance scheme is the previous scheme, which is tied up in the Royal Mail pension plan. Look at me, I'm already sounding confusing the other issue, and I don't want to do that. As far as taking your pension at 65, yes, you can take your pension. You take your pension at age 60. That right was protected. So that's the Royal Mail statutory scheme. And the elements of pension you can take at 65, you can draw them down and take them, or you can wait in the new scheme, i.e. the collective scheme, till you're 67. Those are rights that individuals have that we have negotiated, if you like, and have kept them going. On that deeper issue, though, about how we... as I said before, I'm a trustee, but I've always traded on the fact that I think pensions are made too complicated. And they're made complicated, I think, by people who have got the grasp of them, but they don't want anybody else to get the grasp of them. So they start using abbreviations. They start using what they consider to be complicated mathematics. What we're trying to do here is pull all that apart and say, no. They're not complicated. They're about money being paid in, money being invested, and at a certain age you get a guaranteed amount of money paid to you as a pension, and that's paid to you on a regular basis, and there's access to a tax-free lump sum. You've got government sniffing around that now because they're saying it's tax-free. We could be taxing an element of that, or we could be reducing an element of that. But that is basically what a pension is. Our job, if you like, is to get out there and start to say, what's your concerns? What's your questions? Give us those inquiries that you want. And I never say no to that. In fact, the team I work with in the office I work with in here said they're dreading this because I always say, if you've got a concern, send it in. And they go, we're going to get about 50 emails now, aren't we? And you say, yeah, but that's us representing you, the members. If you've got a concern, raise it. That's our job. We're representing you.
Is this where now I'll put your email in the chat?
Yeah. I'm already regretting that. But, I'm trying to be open and honest with this. We have got the ability to try and help people. Why wouldn't we do that? No. That's where I'm at.
Thank you, Lionel. And Andy, another couple at you if I can. There's loads of questions here, and I think the answer is pretty straightforward, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's been generally asked. Is lots of members are asking about, is there the possibility, the legality, the potential of putting their pensions into one pot so they don't have to go through this constant rigmarole? This is people who are in different schemes. And Jonah, who's obviously one of our reps, is saying, getting more and more questions from members regarding pensions. Is there any trainings for reps going to be taking place to go alongside the booklets?
So absolutely, yes, we will be planning training. We did have a series of one-day events last year that Paul Kennedy led on. Paul was a divisional rep, but as Lionel's already pointed out, he's also a fellow trustee of the RMPP. So Paul delivered about 10 different training events around the United Kingdom for each of the divisions. I went to a couple of them myself, and they were excellent. And all the feedback from the area reps that attended them was superb. Now we need to disseminate that down further below area rep to unit reps as well. So, and we need to work out how to do that. And Kate, our lead on education training, will be working that out as to how we can get the message out, and people can perhaps self-teach by watching, podcasts and modules and all the rest of it. So absolutely, yes, we do need to do more training and get that to as many people as possible. On the one pot issue, it's not a simple yes/no answer. If you've got money in the statutory scheme, which is pre-2012, it's got to stay there because that's absolutely guaranteed by government, and that's the platinum class. It's not at risk in any way, shape or form. Government took on all the assets, but they also took on the liabilities as well. So that's administered by Capita, but it's government owned. So pre-2012 has to stay there. Then there's a number of different schemes since then that Lionel spoke about. One of the things one of our policies that we are pursuing with vigour is the DC scheme, the defined contribution scheme, that's administered by Scottish Widows. That money, at some point, people will be given the chance to, if they so wish, to move that into the collective plan. So at the moment, people are paying into the collective plan. So every single Royal Mail employee that's done more than a year's service is entitled to be in the collective plan, and their money's being paid into that. That is the money today. Money that's in the defined contribution scheme from Scottish Widows, we are pushing very, very hard that there would be the ability, and we hope this will happen next year, that people will give them the choice to say, rather than that money sitting in Scottish Widows, I now wish to move it into the collective plan to join the money I'm paying in every week or every month. And that's something we're working at. It's not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of complexities of that because you're involving firms like Scottish Widows, and we will have to involve the new trustees of the new collective plan. But there's certainly an aspiration, and I think there's a willingness from all to try and make that happen. But I mean, there's a lot of hoops to go through to get to that end position, that end state position.
Thanks, Andy. I'm going to ask you both the same question, but from two different perspectives. Lionel, I guess you as a trustee, Andy, you as a sort of union negotiator. A few members have said, in one of the schemes that there is a significant cash surplus, and people are asking, like, what are we doing with that surplus? Where is it going to go? Is it going to be ours? Is it in the members? How is that going to be allocated? Is there been any negotiations on that? So, Lionel, I guess from a trustee's perspective, your view on the surplus and which scheme it's in, and then Andy, your view, I guess, from the CWU perspective.
So the surplus is in the RMPP scheme, the scheme that I'm a trustee of, and I won't hide it from you. I'm absolutely crystal clear, and it will be in any bit of communication I personally do that surplus needs to be shared with the members of that scheme. What I can't tell you is how that would be shared. As far as the union, and Andy will cover a bit more of this, but as far as the union's concerned, they're crystal clear on it. It comes to the members, and the members are entitled to a share of it. It's their money as much as it is the employers. It's ours. I know what the scheme rules and trustees say, that in the event of the scheme winding up, all the monies revert back to the Royal Mail or to the owner of the Royal Mail. In this case, it'd be the EP group. But that's an argument that needs to be had, and it is an argument that we will come to you, our members, and say, who are in that scheme, this is where we want that money to go, and it is to you. There's no question about that, as far as I'm concerned.
Andy?
Yes. Let's first and foremost be clear that it's really positive that there's a surplus.
Yeah.
And that's a credit to the scheme administrators, Lionel and his fellow trustees, because the investment plans have brought about the surplus. So, it's a healthy scheme. It's well run, and it's going to ensure, and the most important thing is, it's going to ensure that it's going to pay out a pension when people retire. So the what's called the NRA 60, normal retirement age 60, payments, the NAR 65, those, because of the schemes in such a healthy position, are guaranteed. So that's a real positive. Of course, the whole of our executive and our leadership, Dave Ward and Martin Walsh in their negotiations with the EP group, we want to ensure that we get our fair share of the surplus, and we will fight tooth and nail to make sure that's happened. Now, I don't think we actually are going to fall out over the principle, because the EP agreement from December last year has given a firm commitment that money, we're entitled to it. So we've got the building blocks in place to say it can't be all grabbed back by Royal Mail. We've now got to, at some point, work out the distribution and in what format it's. So I wouldn't want anybody to think there's going to be a windfall landing in their bank accounts in the next year, because that surplus that I'm certain would what people in positions of responsibility would want to ensure it's used to help people in their retirement years. But look, the Royal Mail, they need to be warned, hands off of that surplus. That surplus has been there because of our members' contributions, and our members deserve a fair share of that, and we will make sure that happens.
Thanks, Andy. Alana, you want to come in back?
I do. I want to give you an interesting fact, which was the scheme actuary, a guy called Colin Singer, retired yesterday, and he quoted to me. I said a few words about him, and I got on well with him over the years. But he said a few words to me yesterday, which I thought I'd bring to tonight's sort of broadcast. And he said that when the money in 2012 was handed over to the government, and they took a big chunk of money, I don't want anybody to never lose sight of how much money they took out of this scheme. But they took on, as Andy rightly says, the whole responsibility. But they took on 30-odd billion pound, but they also inherited a £5 billion deficit at that point in time. Today, the remainder of that scheme, which is still under our control, is now valued at nearly £7 billion and has got a £1.6 billion surplus. So we've turned it round that much. We've turned it round that much. And that surplus, well, as I already said, belongs to the members as much as it does anyone else. In fact, I'd say the members first, but then I would say that, wouldn't I? I'm a members trustee.
You would want you to say that. Andy, listen to yourself and Lionel there. I mean, I'm going to say this because a couple of members have said it. And you talk about the way the trustees have managed the scheme, the way the union have negotiated the benefits for the members. And the flip side of that, is there a case for saying it shouldn't have been closed, and that we made the wrong decision at the time, and the negotiators, whoever, I mean, I can't even remember what that period, but whoever that was at that point, made the wrong call on behalf of the members?
Right. So, I mean, this is extremely complex. The union opposed the closure of the scheme to future accrual, and that took place actually on the 1st of April 2019, I think it was. The post office scheme closed a year before that for our post office members. Royal Mail was a year later. The arguments at the time from all of the financial experts was all around the longevity of people's lives, and it had been increasing where people were allegedly living longer, and there was concern that there may not have been enough money in the scheme to pay everybody until they passed away. We as a CWU argued that it was a premature decision to close the scheme. Unfortunately, that was the decision, and it was Royal Mail that was pursuing it massively, because their arguments were they didn't want to have a deficit and plug that gap. But, it's history now. It closed in 2019. We then had, an agreement to try and reach under the way forward to was it the way forward? I forget which agreement now was, with where the cash balance scheme was brought about, and that took place over 6.5 years. We thought it should have been shorter, but it took, because of the legislation and everything else, it took us longer to get the collective plan up and running than we wanted. But look, we would have loved to have been in a position where the RMPP lasted for longer for people paying in, but unfortunately that wasn't to be, and the people running the scheme made the decision that it had to close.
Thank you, mate. Lionel, this should be an easy one for you. Carl is asking, about the role of a trustee. So obviously, to let people know, you're elected by CWU members, postal workers, to be one of our trustees on the RMPP scheme. What does the role of a trustee? What does a trustee do? I guess the follow-up question from Carl is the value of, there's loads of different trustees. There's employer trustees and there's independent ones. Why is it valuable the union has trustees? And I guess, what have you done on behalf of the members? Well, in a kind way, I'm asking.
In a kind way. Okay, and I'll take it in a kind way. Well, I think we bring something to the trustee board. And let me be clear, I think the movement of the pensions world is not to have member nominated trustees. If they had their way now, I think the thinking is we're an irritant, we're not really needed, we've not been trained, we're not accountants or actuaries, etc. And there's a view that there should be all professional trustees who are appointed by the company and on they go. Luckily, that's not happening with any of these Royal Mail schemes. Now, what do we bring? So I think, one, we bring a level of common sense, if you like, from the worker's perspective. And I'm always, in fact, I know I irritate people when I attend branch meetings, which I do every now and then, people at the back of the hall talk to me about their pension. I'm getting it from the horse's mouth. The people who are those professional investment advisors, etc., don't go anywhere near a postal worker. They don't. They look at it purely from their own perspective about how they're returning or doing the job that they're being paid to do. So one, we do that. Two, we commit ourselves to an in-depth training program, something I've done all my life as a trustee. So we develop ourselves to the point where we start to then probe the questions that actually open up the discussions. And if, for instance, I did it yesterday over some property that we're involved with in the scheme, and I was asking what I consider to be quite complicated questions for me, but they were very deep questions as far as the advisors were concerned. And they were not struggling to answer them, but one of them said to me afterwards, do you know what, you annoy me sometimes with such the common sense that you put into a question. Like, why did we buy that place in the first place if we knew there was a bloody runway being built 4 foot away from it? You're never going to sell the houses on it, that type of stuff, So I don't think you should lose the contact as a member of the pension plan in putting somebody on that pension board. And in fact, I was quoting earlier on this booklet where we argued for it.
You on screen now?
where we argued it for the first time that we should have 50% of the trustee board as member nominated trustees. And we did that in 1971. And I would say to you today, if it was good in 71, it's good in 2025. Absolutely, we should carry on doing that.
Thank you, Lionel. And there you go, Carl. Another Carl, by the way, just Carl, a different Carl. And he's asked, if the collective scheme is such a good idea, why is Royal Mail the only company offering it a year after it was legalised?
Okay, that's a great question. If I may, Chris, because I'd like to say something about the trustees.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think first and foremost, the workers have got an important voice via the member-nominated trustees. So Lionel and the other trustees are the voice of our members. And it's absolutely vital that in the boardrooms that are discussing pensions, the investments, and everything else, that the union's workers' voice is heard via Lionel.
Agreed.
And I mean, the reason they don't the mood music across pension schemes across the UK is to do away with the member nominated trustee is because they don't want the workers' voice in those boardrooms. Because Lionel, and give him absolute credit here, will hold to account and will challenge at every given opportunity things that he thinks or believes that's wrong on behalf of our members. Yes, it's we will be in a lot worse position and our members would suffer if we didn't have the likes of Lionel involved as a trustee on the board of the RMPP. So
when are you next up for election? That was your campaign kicking off there, Lionel, wasn't it? Well done, Andy.
In terms of the collective plan, and look, we've just elected 3 new trustees as well for the the collective plan. Let's give them a shout. There's Kevin Carey, there's Alan Tate, and Brendan Allen as well. Sorry, Brendan. So Alan, Brendan, and Kevin are now on the trustee board of the collective plan. all of them are elected CWU representatives. The members put them there, and they are there challenging and holding to account the administrators of the collective plan, and they're the voice of our members in that boardroom. So that's vitally important. In terms of the collective plan, there are comparable or similar collective plans in places like Holland and Canada. So it's not unique across the globe, but it is unique at this stage in Royal Mail. The legislation is allowing other companies to follow suit, and there is some consultative arrangements going on with government at the moment to see if other organisations, other companies want to follow suit. It's exceptionally complex, and if people say we want a collective plan, it won't happen overnight. I do believe that there are moves afoot for other organisations, companies to move into that sphere. But what you're not going to do, and our fellow trade unions are going to defend defined benefit schemes where they still exist. So defined benefit schemes still exist in local government, for teachers, for the civil service, and whilst they're still there, and long may they continue, then defined benefit is where we would ideally want to be. So let's not kid ourselves. Whilst the collective plan is very, very good, and we support it, we would have much preferred the defined benefit scheme to have continued. People are not going. Other trade unions, other workers, other organisations are not going to give up a defined benefit scheme to go into a collective plan. Where the collective plan is better, it's better than an individual defined contribution scheme. So we've got members in an individual defined contribution scheme through Scottish Widows, which has been in place for a number of years now, and we would argue very, very strongly that the collective plan is superior to those arrangements. So I think you will find that over a number of years, the number of collective plans will grow across the UK, and indeed you might see a number of associated or affiliated groups merge together to create a bigger collective plan. The Royal Mail is one of the biggest employers in the UK, which lends itself to making the collective plan more successful in the future. Small organisations, small companies, it's not so niche for them, so they would have to come together as a trade group. But I'm confident that there's lots of debates going on across the pensions industry, and there is movement towards collective plans where DC schemes are in existence at the moment.
Thank you, Andy. Lionel, one of the things we as a union always really care for is not to give people financial advice, and I think that's really important. But also, I think if Boldev is put a comment here, I think I would like you to challenge and take on, if you like. Mm-hmm. So he's put, Boldev is obviously a member, I'm assuming. He's put, let's face it, if you pay in, you get nothing out. The Royal Mail pension's gone to the dogs. So forget paying you. More likely, the best thing to do is save as you earn in an ISA. He's been corrected by lots of members who are talking about, that's a mad thing. You're almost letting the employer off the hook. What about the employer's contributions? But I guess defending a chance for you to defend actual value of a pension,
Well, years ago I sat and had a debate with a guy called Mark Wilson, who walked into my union room where I was based in Dartford, and he said to me, I'm coming out of the union, I'm coming out of the pension scheme, it's all a waste of money. I've been promised £155,000 when I retire at 60. So I said, well, okay then, do that. But what are you paying in for that? Oh, well, I'll be paying in exactly what I'm paying in now to the Royal Mail scheme. I went, okay, what about the Royal Mail contribution? At that time, they were paying 27% of his pay. Well, I ain't got that, have I? So I said, yeah, so you're losing that contribution, that you're not getting that. At the moment, in the collective scheme that Andy's just been talking about, the employer's paying 13.6% in, and the employees paying their own amount in. So that money's piling in and building up. The second thing you get is you then get guarantees around it. For instance, there's a widow's pension paid, there's a children's pension paid, there's a death in service pension paid. There's money paid to people inside that scheme where circumstances dictate, for instance, through ill health, that they're going. So a pension is not just for retirement, it's actually given us a level of benefit for our people, and that's why we see it as an integral part of the remuneration package. Now, I say all of that, but if somebody says, yeah, thanks very much, but I'm not interested in that, there's not a lot I can do after that. What our job is as a trade union, and this was taught to me by my mentor, who sat down and showed me the very first calculation, like you made a comparison to algebra. It was like that to me at the time, but it taught me to recognise that what I do today is for what I need tomorrow. And I think that's an important part of the journey. If you're comfortable in saying, I don't need that from the Royal Mail pension plan, in whatever shape or form it's in and whatever shape or form you're sitting in it in, that's your choice. But I absolutely do argue that the paying into the Royal Mail pension plan or any pension scheme is for your advantage. ISAs are there, and if you can afford to save in an ISA and get that tax-free bit of interest on it, rock on. But pensions are not just for when you retire. They give you a level of coverage which is worth its weight in gold, in my opinion.
Thanks, Ryan. A final question, Andy, and I'll give you both a chance to sum up. Steve T says, we got stitched up with a cash balance scheme as it ran for 4 years longer than originally quoted, and now we have to pay tax on the excess when taking the 65 pension option. So, I think undoubtedly the CDC scheme took longer than we'd all hoped to come to fruition. But your sort of response to Steve?
I think he makes a fair point, to be perfectly honest, in that yes, the tax issue is a concern. We are not allowed by law to give financial advice. So I think I would always encourage people, if they can, when they're nearing retirement, to get advice on pensions as to how to maximise the investment and to ensure that they can have the best way of tax avoidance by law. So, look, the cash balance scheme, it ran for 6.5 years. It has meant that a big sum of money has been accrued by a lot of our members, and that cash balance sum of money is payable when people are due to retire, and that's a sum of money that they wouldn't ordinarily get if we hadn't had that scheme. It was unfortunate the collective plan took longer to deliver through Parliament, and lawyers were involved, so on and so forth. But thankfully we got there and we got the collective plan off the ground. I think the other issue is, and it's your previous question to Lionel, and we bandy about figures, but the employer pays 13.3% into the collective plan, and another 0.3 into the ill health premiums. Now, you put that in cash terms, you're talking getting on for £1,300, maybe £1,500, depends on the salary, the grade of the member. Is cash money is going into that scheme, and that's going into there, and then the investments will ensure that it improves and it grows over time. If you're not in the scheme, you're forfeiting that money. You're saying to Royal Mail, I don't want that 13.3% to go into my pension pot. You can save it, Royal Mail, and you can keep it. So, look, I mean, we don't give advice on investments, but we certainly would advise everybody to be in the scheme, because they'd be losing out on the 13.3% and the 0.3 going into the ill health premium. So, look, it's all about the future. And if people are not working when they retire, they need an income and they need money to live. And this is a decent pension. It's not a Rolls Royce, but it's not a mini miner either. So, but it will ensure that people will get a reasonable and fair pension in retirement, and that's what we've been working hard to ensure.
Thanks, Andy. I'm going to give you both now, starting with yourself, Lionel, a chance to get any final points across to the members that you want to raise tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I thought about this because I know you always throw this at the end. I think I wanted to say tonight that this is the first chance I've had for a long time to say to people, pensions in any industry, but particularly in the Royal Mail, are an expensive animal to keep. And if the employer had their way, they would cut that down as fast as they could. Make no bones about that. So whatever we can build around the concept of a pension and what we can squeeze out of the employer to fund that is an improvement. It's like money in your pay packet for us. And we see it, as I said at the start, deferred pay, because you're going to need it when you retire. Or if you die in service, your dependents will need that pension, etc. So pensions for me have always been a major plank, if you like, in the overall remuneration package. And I finish on this point. Andy's absolutely right when he says about the money side of it. But I also then ram home the point that you're not just putting it in there for that. You're putting it in to give yourself protections whilst you're working in this organisation and this company. And that is around things like ill health. It is around death in service. It is around building up pension, access to benefits for your family, etc. Now, do we need to do more? Do we need to educate people? Do we need to show people more? We have been doing, if you like, and we're committed to doing that. This booklet is part of that process. The walkthrough, which is going to be available, is part of that process. Hold us to account on that, and then use us to answer your questions and your concerns. And I'm telling you tonight, we're available to do that.
Thank you, Lionel. I appreciate that. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I'd echo what Lionel said there. It's very sensible. We would, to put this down into a granular position, there is the death benefit, and we need to ensure, and this is a plea to members, please register on the portals for the different schemes. You've got to do a nomination for each of the different schemes you're in. You can't, one nomination for one scheme doesn't apply to the other schemes. So you've got to do a separate one for each scheme. And what we heard earlier this week, unfortunately, in the new scheme, only one person who had passed away had done a nomination. Over 150 other of our members hadn't done a nomination, and that makes it more difficult with people's estate and all the rest of it to ensure that the money goes to the next of kin. So, we don't want to talk about death in service, but with an organisation that's got 120 to 130,000 workers, there is a lot of deaths in service, unfortunately, as people are working longer in life. So, please do the nominations. Also, please think about the matched 1% boost, where you pay an extra 1%. At the moment, you pay 6% of your pay into the scheme. So if you increase that to 7%, the employer will move up from 13.3 to 14.3. 40,000 of our members have seen the benefit of that, and if we could increase that, and if a year down the line we had 80,000 people paying the booster, that would be brilliant. I'm not sure Royal Mail would be so happy about paying an extra 1% in for all those 1,000 workers. And the other issue is that the CWU and leadership, we want to make sure that we can continuously improve pensions. We have an agenda to want to do better. We're constantly challenging and putting to the employer that we need to up the game. We need to do better. We need to think out of the box and try and get better, innovative policies to make life better for people once they leave this Royal Mail.
Thank you, Andy. So thank you to both of you. Really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you to members who tuned in. One more thing, I think that's the end of us on pensions. But those of you who paid a political levy as part of your membership, the vast majority of you, depending on when you joined, are going to be entitled to a vote in the ongoing deputy leadership contest for the Labour Party. The CWU National Executive is recommending to members that you vote for Lucy Powell, but certainly recommending that you actually use your vote, because this is one of the reasons we affiliate, so at key times we can have, you can have your say and we can have our say as a trade union. Earlier this week, our General Secretary Dave Ward caught up with Lucy Powell and we produced this short video for you to watch.
Morning, Lucy.
Hi.
I think it's true to say that our members have got lots of concerns about Labour. That reflects what's happening across the country. We're pleased to say decided to nominate you and support you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm incredibly grateful to you and the union for recommending me. And I understand a lot of your members will be feeling disconnected from Labour and uncertain about some of the things that we've done, and they're not really that clear, like what is the purpose of this Labour government? Are they really on my side as a postal worker or as a post office worker or BT worker. So that's something I want to try and put right as deputy.
We were particularly pleased with your kind of response to the questions on the Employment Rights Bill.
Absolutely.
I think you know that our union was a kind of founding union of the New Deal for Workers campaign.
When I was in government, my job was to bring forward the legislation, to prioritise, to get the legislation ready. But then the next stage is all the regulations, because actually what that bill itself does is give the government powers to do certain things, but we've got to make sure the government actually takes those powers in the right way and then brings them into effect. So as the deputy leader, that's something that I will, I will really push for that, to make sure that that is in the next King's Speech as well.
I believe that what the government have inherited is an economy that's founded on low pay, insecure work, and what I always term grotesque levels of inequality.
Absolutely.
And this bill goes, a big step towards starting to address those issues. I think we should just briefly talk about the issues with reform.
Yes.
Because clearly what's happening in the country is will be reflected in members of our union and other trade unions, where there is probably a swing towards reform. The way I look at that is that I think that it's right that people have got legitimate concerns about illegal immigration and about the ability of a government to control immigration. And this Labour government is going to have to address that issue.
Yeah.
Equally, though, we are worried about what reform are proposing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I really strongly feel like we've one of the things we've done is we've seeded the agenda. We've let reform set the agenda for the last few months. When we're in government, we should be the ones setting the agenda, and we should be setting the agenda about what we think is really wrong with this country and how we're fixing it. And as you say, what is really wrong is a deeply unequal economy, particularly, but society sort of more broadly. And what are we doing to rewire that, to fix that, to really make the economy work in the interests of the many, not the few, if you like. Whereas, Farage wants us to believe that all the problems the country faces are to do with immigrants, and if we just rounded everybody up and shipped them out, that would make people feel better off. I fundamentally disagree with that, and it won't. Yes, of course, we have to show that we can control our borders, who comes in, who comes out, and who's contributing and who's here. That, I think, is a prerequisite for any government. But that's not our agenda of change, to be honest. Probably a lot of your members as well voted Brexit in the first place because they want to see this change happening in how their lives are working, and which at the moment are deeply unsure about their sort of futures and their income and everything. And that's what we've got to put right. And the Employment Rights Bill, for me, as well as some of the other good things we've done in this Parliament, like public ownership of the railways, public ownership of buses, the Renters' Rights Bill as well, making sure that people can't just have their rents hiked all the time. These are fundamental things that are changing the way the country works, but we're just not shouting very loudly about them, really.
No, we've got to do, I think you've said it, Labour's got to do a lot better.
Exactly, we've got to do a lot better. And one of the things I've said is let's get that megaphone back off Farage and let's tell our own story about what's really wrong with the country and how we're going to get it back. And that's something I think I can help with.
Ultimately, I think what people are crying out for is to see that their families, their grandchildren, their children, younger people have a chance in life. And I look at the youngsters today, 2 or 3 different jobs, they have to share accommodation with. It's not right. And these are the real issues that I think Labour have got to do more to address.
I agree.
And, we're hoping that if you're successful in this campaign, that you're going to obviously push for that change in direction.
That's what I'm here to do, and to do that sort of proudly and strongly and authentically as well, because I think people want to know who is this Labour government, whose side are you on, and I think we've got to be a lot clearer about that, because otherwise that's why people do go to the extremes or do go to other parties, because they're not seeing that we're on their side, and that's something we've got to really put right quite urgently.
Well, let's hope you're successful.
Thank you.
And we're pleased to be able to nominate you as a union, because we know that you do mean what you say. You're going to try and push for this different direction. It's not going to be easy, and I think that's what you're up for. I think that comes across loud and clear.
Thank you. Thanks so much.